Janina, can you hear me?
I can. You can hear me?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
put my headset on.
Mhm. All right. Hello. Welcome everyone to the inaugural session of the CareNext Collective. My name is Danina Kapitanovic, and I'm delighted to be your host and facilitator today. CareNext Collective is envisioned as a community of practice and interest, a space to inform, educate, inspire, and mobilize. It's about sharing best practices, surfacing real-world innovation stories, and building peer-to-peer connections across our coalition, from frontline care to research labs to entrepreneurial teams. We'll be hosting these sessions monthly, and they're open to everyone across Waterloo Regional Health Network, the University of Waterloo, and our broader ecosystem who cares about shaping the future of health through innovation. Language really matters when you're trying to do anything big or important. Language is mindset. And so the words we use matter. So for this first session, we're going to unpack a really big word at the core of everything that certainly I want to do with you, that is seemingly ubiquitous in health and care right now, which is innovation. So what is innovation really? To help with this exploration, I'd like to introduce two extraordinary women to help us learn, generate some insights, and start to stretch our thinking into this incredible space. So joining us today are the ever-curious and brilliantly insightful Dr. Zaina Hayat and Dr. Catherine Burns. Zaina is a health futurist whose massive transformational purpose is to modernize health systems through innovation. Zaina has many hats, of which some are the adjunct faculty in health sector strategy at the University of Toronto's Rotman School of Management, where she instructs a course called Healthcare Innovation. She's also co-founder and faculty of the Netherlands National Health Innovation School. We're also joined by Dr. Catherine Burns, a visionary leader at the intersection of healthcare and technology and a champion for human-centered innovation. Catherine is a professor in systems design engineering at the University of Waterloo and associate vice president of health initiatives and one of the part of the brain trust behind CareNext. So welcome, Zaina and Catherine. Um, we are on two different platforms, and I'm so excited to have all of you here. So I'd like to start with a quick warm-up. So if using your Slido, if you could answer in one word or short phrase, what does innovation mean to you? We'll use your answers to help frame the conversation today. So if you could do that, I would really appreciate that, hearing from you. All right. So I'm finally seeing it on my screen. So some of the answers that are coming in, it's efficiency, it's a way of thinking beyond the norm, progress, something new that brings value, solving challenges in new ways, future thinking to create new value, collaboration, doing things differently, fresh thinking, love that, improvement, developing solutions outside the box, solving a problem that improvement, change, address differently, creativity, new ideas. So lots of wonderful answers coming through. Knowledge, progress and future. When the status quo will no longer work and you need a resolution, mindset, exciting, fearless, solving challenges in new ways, being inquisitive. Wonderful. Thank you all so much for coming through with these answers. So let me start us off by offering a few reflections to ground today's conversations. Um, First one that I would like to address with all of you is what do we actually mean when we talk about innovation in healthcare? At CareNext, we define innovation as the intentional process of creating value through new or improved ways of delivering care, organizing services, or addressing unmet needs. Whether it's through organizational change, introduction of technology, broadening scope of practice, uh, broadening, the scopes of our policies, as long as it's grounded in the lived experience of users and embedded as a core way of working across the system. That's important because innovation isn't a shiny object or a side project. It's not just about a piece of technology or AI. We hear about AI all the time these days. It's not about that. It's about reconceptualizing how we solve problems. And that requires us to look not only at what's new, but at what's useful, scalable, and human-centered. Now, another incredibly important notion at the core of why we're here today is why is developing a shared understanding of innovation so critical right now, especially within complex systems like hospitals and universities. Because without a shared understanding, we talk past each other. One person sees innovation as research, another sees it as quality improvement, yet another sees it as tech procurement. But to drive meaningful change, we need alignment around purpose, methods, and outcomes. Hospitals and universities are both systems where knowledge, risk, and culture collide. And that can either produce inertia or it can produce breakthroughs. A shared language and mindset helps us move from isolated efforts to system level transformation, which brings me to the vision and how does this connect to the vision and mission of CareNext? CareNext was created to do exactly that, to bring the discovery power of academia, the implementation urgency of healthcare, and the ingenuity of the entrepreneurial sector, bridge them and bring them closer together. We're building a structured ecosystem where innovation is not occasional, but embedded. That means training and supporting a workforce inside healthcare institutions to be innovation ready. It means opening up our health system as a test bed. It means co-developing with patients and providers the next generation of technology in order to make it usable for them and adoptable by them. It means aligning policy, procurement, data, and leadership to enable rather than obstruct change. So from that perspective, CareNext is not a program, it's a strategic approach to system innovation that is grounded in evidence, powered by partnerships, and orientated toward impact. So with this, I'd like to bring in my collaborators into the conversation today. So Zaina, now that we have a shared definition of innovation, let's talk about how to move innovation in complex healthcare contexts. You often remind us that not all innovation is created equal or should be approached the same way. Can you walk us through some of the key types of innovation?
Yes, I think it's really helpful that, your ecosystem, which I love what you've done, you've got a working definition. I'll only challenge a couple words. I would take the word improvement
Mhm,
out of the whole lexicon
mhm,
because, again, it's been a dominant tool of healthcare called quality improvement. The word efficiency I saw show up on that. No, that is not innovation. Just one thing I'll just say to set it up because you really need to know what kind of innovation you're trying to do to figure out what methodology or what type or what strategy, because it's like choose your own adventure, but the method, I often say if what you're doing today and how it works generally works, it's below what the quality standard or it could be 25, 30% of most healthcare. Then you're just doing quality improvement. Do efficiency, do business process optimization. Don't use your innovation team. Don't call it that. And that's really hard to do, by the way, to do, everyday
Mhm.
efficiency improvements. Um, if it's fundamentally not working and you think there could be a better way, you're going to use some of the language I just saw of creativity, thinking outside of the box, but that's not innovation. Innovation is actually doing the thing that's very new or maybe a lot better versus improved over the
Mhm.
current to unlock this new value, which I love in your definition. And I often say 5x. If you're not going for a 5x lift over current state, and that could be savings of cost, experience, clinical outcomes, staff experience, or some combination, do not use an innovation methodology. Okay, so let's just start with how bad is the current state and how much do you believe you can make it better? And then in that context, I normally like to separate out kind of three types in general. So the traditional most innovation, the 11,000 books on Amazon about innovation, because there's a new one every hour, is what we call sustaining innovation, which is you're getting that 5x because you're having a new or much better way to get the result or a better result than with the current way you do things. That should be like 90% of the time. But that's very different from quality improvement. Let's be clear. And that's very different from creativity. Creativity is just, how innovatively you are thinking, but you haven't done any innovation until it's implemented at scale. The second type, we have to separate from is breakthrough innovation. That's like what the mRNA vaccine did for COVID. We tried all these things for 2 years, and then boom, overnight, this thing gave us that 5x lift. That's what the GLP-1 medications are doing for obesity. Weight Watchers just went out of business yesterday. So breakthrough is usually science based and it gets you something that you cannot remodel any of the current state to get to. And then the last I'll say is disruptive. And to me, that's the core textbook of my entire course on health innovation. Disruptive is using simple technology to fundamentally change the economics of how things are done, usually a much lower cost model. And then that should let you leapfrog and democratize and displace the incumbent. Healthcare has a massive affordability and cost problem because we rely on labor mostly. And so breaking the compromise of the cost through disruptive innovation, which is not fancy tech, you usually need tech to scale and to lower the cost. That to me is the unfinished business where the dominant should be. So those are the three. Think of sustaining, it's just like 90% vanilla innovation, very hard. Breakthrough, very rare, very science. And disruptive takes magic because you got to take apart all the old foundations of healthcare. And most producers who have getting doing very well in the current models of healthcare do not want to give that up.
Thank you so much for that. You speak my language. A big influence in the way that I think about innovation is John Boyd, who's a military pilot. And I have, often used the corollary of his definition of innovation, which is a process through which we turn creative ideas into practice. It's not innovation if no one uses it. And we can talk about types, but setting up fundamentally that concept that it only becomes innovation when it's put into practice and scaled is fundamental to everything I believe. So thank you for that. Now, Zena, can you walk us through how should teams match their approach or toolkits to the type of innovation they're trying to pursue?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely even if so you don't say, "Oh, I'm going to go do breakthrough innovation today" or
Yeah.
disruptive. It's got to, the problem you're trying to solve. Or by the way, it's not always problem. We love that language in healthcare,
Mm-hmm.
but it also could be a massive opportunity. Let's say the Waterloo Health Region, you want to get into an adjacent market, which most hospitals are now. They're reinventing,
Mm-hmm.
their platform to deliver health,
Mm-hmm.
not deliver only acute care. That's opportunity. I don't think that's problem, right? So, what are you
Mm-hmm.
trying to go after? What's the current way it's being done? Who's doing that? And what strategy do you need if you want to, again, get that 5x lift to implement to get value at scale? Then you'll know, okay, well, this maybe a breakthrough will get us there. Maybe it's going to be disruptive. Maybe it's sustaining. And by the way, maybe it's not innovation. Maybe it's just quality improvement. Maybe it's just a
Mm-hmm.
policy innovation without having to actually change,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? So just know, kind of
Mm-hmm.
make it fit for purpose and then your methodology. And I think this is where I think the Waterloo region is at risk because we can be very technocratic. And
Mm-hmm.
when you're in an
Mm-hmm.
environment of research and technology, and my kid goes to Waterloo, and I know how incredible
Mm-hmm.
that ecosystem is. You know, sometimes a technology allows us to do something we just could not do before, right? AI,
Mm-hmm.
I think, has brought that to healthcare. And so you might
Mm-hmm.
lead because technology let you think about the problem in a way you just couldn't before, right? But
Mm-hmm.
it's rarely should be that, right? Like it mostly is everything you said. Understand the system, map this what you're doing, find the holes that you could maybe wedge, and then figure
Mm-hmm.
out what a combination of process change, policy change, payment model
Mm-hmm.
change, and of course technology you need to bring
Mm-hmm.
together to get that done. So that's what I would be. It's like you said, focus on the result you want and work backwards.
Mm-hmm.
And then there is a abundant toolkit of methodologies out there. You can't be like our methodology of innovation is hammer and everything's a nail. That's
Mm-hmm.
going to be, I think, a path to value destruction.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you and I always I feel like I'm in absolute alignment with everything you say. Say that part of the program and a subset of the program will also be, to the point that you're making about technology and the risk that we run here in the Waterloo region being just so technocentric. It will be the advent and support of co-development type of partnerships. I think huge problem, especially as we move in the realm of digital technologies, is it's being created by people who don't understand the complexity of healthcare, don't understand the concept of usership because they don't have that access. And I have found in my practice that creating that, building a culture innovation gives us an opportunity to bring health workforce into the process of co-creating these technologies by kind of bringing them inside and giving them access. It also helps with change management because through the involvement in the process of co-development, there's a sense of ownership that clinicians and administrators get by being involved, by feeding into it, and they're more likely to want to adopt it. So, in terms of sort of the vision for CareNext, creating that sort of sandbox where, based on specific challenges we are facing, we get involved in helping innovators in the sort of entrepreneurial space co-create that technology is a huge focus. You've touched upon something that often plagues innovation programs, and I see as a risk as I've kind of moved through systems and collaborated, which is that sort of differentiation and creation of the continuum between quality improvement and innovation teams. Do you have any advice or tips in terms of kind of how to separate that out and how to how to instill that continuum and that collaboration between a quality improvement department and innovation department
I
and
mean,
inside
I've got a
hospitals?
great slide I would normally show. It's in the first hour
Mm-hmm.
of my health innovation course I teach. So I basically say, innovation, the methodology gets you that first big lift of potential new value. Again, if you're not going for
Mm-hmm.
5x, in my view, just don't bother. It's not going to be
Mm-hmm.
worth what it's going to take to get the implementation at scale. Quality improvement then gets you to get that thing way better and better and better to be
Mm-hmm.
standardized. So think of to me, remember there was BlackBerry, sorry, Waterloo. iPhone came out, right? Very, very different value proposition. But remember iPhone 1? You would never be
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, we did it. That no, we
Mm-hmm.
iPhone quality improved to iPhone 17. So it's just that first big lift to break the seal of the old paradigm. And wow, do we have old paradigm in health and care? Get us out, and then you got to continuously improve on the new way of doing things because there's no way you're going to get it right. I don't even think in the first 2 years of getting implementation at scale. So that's to me how the two work hand in hand. But being clear at the beginning, is this an improvement problem or an innovation problem, is fundamental.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you for that, Zena. What do you see as risk of misalignment between problem type and methodologies you spoke to?
Look, we know like 90%, again, in the literature of attempts at innovation fail. And maybe that's good. Like, if you think of the venture capital model, it's also a 10% hit rate. It's a hit-based business.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's more like 99.9 in healthcare because, one, we don't frame the problem, dimensionalize it, all these things, use the good hygiene of having the right people at the table, led with the people closest to the patient, all those great things. So methodology-wise, we don't do well. but also that, we build an innovation unit or craft or center or whatever you call yourself, and you're kind of a one trick pony, and so you're forcing a methodology onto a problem that doesn't, the mismatch, and then that just
Mhm.
means you're going to get fatigue from innovation. It's very
Mhm.
easy to lose credibility, Danina. You're new to this thing, but you have a couple duds that give people a bad taste. Guess who's going to avoid you when you call, for the next
Mhm.
one, right? So you just really want it to be an experience that people are like, wow, that was really hard, but I saw the results. And you're going to have
Mhm.
multiple failures if your methodology is not fit for purpose. And I can share many examples, maybe in the discussion of that.
Mhm.
And by the way, in my own work, I used to be a chief innovation officer.
Mhm.
We didn't get it right many times. I've had a lot of big, spectacular face plants in hindsight that I wish I understood the implications of problem, almost like problem solution fit, if you will, in terms
Mhm.
of your innovation approach and your methodology.
Well, to me, Zena, that speaks to the importance of sort of normalizing failure and directly proportionate that to that is sort of where is your risk aversion, which in healthcare tends to be very high. Um, as long as we function like a learning organization where we can take lessons learned and ensure that that's sort of embedded. It's not an easy feat in healthcare because, like I said, we're naturally risk averse, but there's an opportunity in there as well to build a culture of an organization that's unafraid to try and to think outside the box. I'd like to bring Catherine is right now. Catherine is a system design expert and academic leader. You work at the intersection of ideas and implementation. What role, in your opinion, can universities play in driving real world health innovation?
Okay, yeah, thanks, Danita. Um, I mean, first of all, I mean, I think we are kind of talent based, or at least that's a big part of our responsibility is developing that talent. It's really about developing how people think and how people problem solve. It's really about making them learn about innovation, learning from people like Zaina, learning about different approaches to innovation, but also learning the technical skills that will allow people to be good innovators. It is about doing that maybe more fundamental work that pays off 20 years later that you're not going to see or hear from us for 20 years on. So it is about, I love Zaina's example of, the GLP-1s and the mRNAs.
Mhm.
They seem like they came out of nowhere. From our perspective, they didn't. They came out of 20 years of people working in their labs, fighting to get a grant, slaving
Mhm.
away, hiring students, 20 years of that, right?
Mhm.
And then it's kind of ready to be that game changer, right? And I think academia is the place that can kind of support that kind of work. Um, I'm maybe going to kind of argue back a little bit that I think BlackBerry innovated the space. And I'm going to say maybe I think that iPhone was the quality improvement. But we had those people who kind of had that culture of kind of risk taking. They had the technical skills, and they knew what they could do with what they had at the time. They knew they could do, like Zaina said, 5 times better. And so I think that's kind of an important
I mean,
part of
I would say BlackBerry was the breakthrough that
yeah, yeah.
defined the whole market
Mhm.
and category, right? And then they got, a sustaining innovation came, which was iPhone, and then it was quality
Right.
improvement. Yep.
Exactly. There you go. I regained my Waterloo cred. That's good. But I think that's our obligation though, right? And sometimes I think we have to, the world is changing too, and we're asking for our organizations to be more innovative. I think that brings out a lot of questions to our universities about how are we preparing people for that. I'm not certain we always have the right answer for that, and I think that's a really challenging question right now. But are we, looking back at the word cloud, there were a lot of words that were maybe university things. Like, are we teaching creativity? Are we teaching, I'm going to say, are we teaching critical thinking? Because to be innovative, you have to be able to recognize the problem. But are we teaching communication? Because we need to be able to talk to the others that are experiencing the problems, which I think Danina gets exactly into where you're going with CareNext. But are we also teaching like empathy
Mhm.
that we understand the problem so that we can engage properly?
Well, it's certainly, the biggest leaps I have seen made and I have witnessed or been a part of in my career have come from nexus places where domains come together, at the intersection of academia, entrepreneurship, and practice, right? Bringing all of these people sort of into the same fold. I mean, challenges obviously present themselves in figuring out how to make them work together, and that's certainly where CareNext comes in as a platform. Speaking of CareNext, one thing it's trying to do is also bridge sort of research and clinical care. What makes that collaboration? What would make that collaboration effective, in your opinion, Catherine? And where do we sometimes fall short?
Okay, so Danine, I'll tell you why I think CareNext is really so important and so critical. Um, if we just do things from the academic side, and we will, we'll be at our labs and we'll have smart people around us and we'll come up with smart ideas. But we can hit that mismatch problem, right? Where that smart idea isn't solving that problem. Okay, and that can be just very frustrating when people finally go through it because they're walking around trying to sell a solution that doesn't have a problem, right? And that's ineffective. That's at least some of the 99% of failures that Zaina's talking about is people not understanding that match. Okay, and so what's really special about CareNext is it gives us that chance to open up that conversation. Okay, it gives us that chance, through you and through what you're going to accomplish here to bring those problems into our environment. Okay. Let us maybe be a little less technocratic about it. Think about the problem first. Okay. And then bring our skills to bear or reach out as we need more skills. So there's kind of this push and pull, right, to how a university interacts with healthcare innovation. And a lot of times I think it's been really one-sided. I think it's just been us kind of pushing our stuff at a receptor that maybe they're not the right solutions, not the right time, maybe they're not framed the right way, maybe we're not there long enough to see them through. There can be 100 different reasons. But CareNext brings forward that push and pull. Okay, it opens up that conversation. I think it's going to be something really special. So I really believe in it.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, like I said, you're part of the brain trust that conceived it and hugely important pillar of it. So I think this also brings us to the notion that you're so dedicated to, which is designing innovation around people, not just technologies or policies. What, in your opinion, does that look like in practice?
Yeah. It's a bit tricky. Okay, so so we've done some studies in my lab, looking at innovation and looking usually 90% of the time it's an innovation that was designed in a university and then it's brought into the setting, and it might fail, it might succeed. A lot of it goes back to that idea of fit or match, right? And if they get lucky and it fits and the team is motivated enough, that can start to work. If it doesn't fit, um, you really do have a problem. Like you've taken up a lot of people's time for one thing. You've lost a lot of trust. Okay, and trust is really the thing that I think these kinds of relationships rely on.
Yeah.
And you've taken people who have a very busy and important job, taking care of people, and you're taking them away from their jobs, right? And they're not going to be ready to go back into that innovation experience. Uh, so I think it needs to start coming from the inside out. But I think that also means expanding the conversation. I mean, I think it means talking to each other a little more. I think it means empowering the people who have the problems to be ready to identify them, to reach out. It means also teaching us at the universities or the people who have the ideas how to listen, because I don't think we're always the best at that. And I think as we start to pull these together, we're going to be able to come forward in that conversation about what really are the right problems and the right problems that we have those strong solutions for so that we can get those big wins, right? Yeah.
Thank you for that. One huge part of it for me is sort of kind of where it all begins, where the process of diffusion of innovation begins is sort of knowledge dissemination and the importance of knowledge. And so want to say that, one goal behind CareNext Collective is to create a platform for really broad knowledge sharing, where, we're going to try as best as we can to avoid speaking in very super technical terms, but in terms that anyone across, the REN universe and the UW universe can understand, so that we can kind of level set and take inspiration. Another aspect that sort of the first one's kind of harks back to the interest part. The second part, the practice part, is we're going to look to bring people who have been innovative and have innovated in the course of their work to share those experiences, and specifically from the perspective of why and how, so as to, as I said at the beginning, kind of create that peer-to-peer network, and that we, come into position that we start understanding each other's realities. And same goes for our collaborations with UW, right? Like bringing those back here so that we can share them. And so I'll give it up right away. One of the future sessions in the next month or so, like I said, we're looking to do these monthly, will be a project that we've done with Catherine around human factors. There've been some very insightful results, which we're looking forward to sharing with the community. I'd like to open it up to both of you right now. For all of you, for both of you, what's one misconception about innovation that you wish we could leave behind?
I think we hit a few. Again, it is not technology. It is not commercialization. It's not research. It's not quality improvement. It's not efficiency. It's not creativity, right? It's this result that, again, is a bigger lift, usually from doing something completely new or much, much better than the way we do things today. And then this implementation at scale. So I think those are a lot of things that right now I think cloud. I think the other thing that I find people get wrong is as soon as, we recruit Danina from Quebec, big coup for Ontario. And then there's this declaration, we've put up our shingle that we're open for innovation business, that anyone who's trying to do anything, like I'm going to, make a scheduling app, or I want to, use an AI agent to write my HR job spec, they're like going to call the innovation department, right? So again, I think, and then that's not your ecosystem's problem. That's going to be CareNext, is really declare, when do you call us and come to us? What's our scope? What's our boundary? And how they often say, oh, innovation is everyone's job. Yeah, like there's a lot of things that do not need to be done by a central craft,
Exactly.
right? Like if you're not innovating every day in your job, what are you doing in the 21st century when change is happening? I can't even keep up. My slides are outdated in 10 minutes every time. You know what I mean? Like, so I think that would be the one is, and maybe that's where your communication is going to be clear. These roles you describe, which I love how you've designed the platform, a lot of capacity building, education, knowledge, community. But when are you going to get your hands up and bring some methodology to get a big problem?
Mhm.
Getting that really clear so that others can just learn and then go drive innovation on their own.
That's wonderful feedback. Thank you. Catherine, do you have any
Yeah,
perspective on this?
I was just going to say that it's just not as easy as it seems.
Yeah.
I think this comes from working with students, and working through capstones and projects like that. There's so many great ideas, and they're right, they are great ideas, and they're good ideas.
Mhm.
But that path from that idea to um, something that works to something that fits, there's a long journey there. But that's an important journey, and usually, I don't know, a lot of times the first thing doesn't work out, but you should be learning from the journey. Okay, did you
Mhm.
start your journey at the right place? Could you start at a different place next time? Uh, yeah, the idea is all, I don't want to say it's the easy part because it's not the easy part, but it's certainly, innovation is a hard journey. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And one thing that I kind of the one word in the whole sort of cycle or universe of innovation that I'd like to go that I would like to disappear is failure, right? Because of the finality that it brings in its sort of kind of narrow semantic definition. To me, it's a space of there's experiences, it's a space for opportunity, failure is you've tried, it didn't work, and you've dropped it, you've abandoned it. But if it leads to other insights, and if it leads, then it actually can be a place from which innovation can emerge. So that's certainly one for me that I would like to
Yeah, and
disappear. In my team, it's a banned
so
word. Like, we don't fail.
I'll just add, so there's two ways I find organizations deal with the F word in this healthcare context of we don't have risk aversion. We don't even try to manage risk. We try to exclude risk,
Yeah.
right? That's really the worst situation for innovation. But there's two ways. One is you actually wade into the F word. You celebrate failure. I would love to see CareNext have the most spectacular fail of the year award, right?
Yeah.
Open Lab, the kind of system change innovation lab of UHN, they have a cemetery in their lab, their studio, of little epitaphs. Like that one died, and they celebrate and they honor it, right? Like they grieve it, but because they got all that muscle memory. Or yeah, you don't use it if it triggers people to be like, that's it, we're gonna go back to paper charting now because so you have to decide. But
Yeah.
there is a museum of failure in Europe, and
Mhm.
I've been to health innovation conferences where we just wade into failure. So that could be a,
Mhm.
a way to make it kind of, not such a scary word. I don't know. You can decide, but I'm
Mhm.
with you
Mhm.
on being aware of how much of an aversion there is to that, and not going in blindly about this word innovation is going to get us so excited that we're going to overcome this mindset. That is not true. I agree.
Mhm. Um, for both of you, how, in your opinion, can we make innovation a core capability in health systems and not just a side project? I mean, this is sort of my principal talking point since the moment I've landed. It's not a project. It's not a thing that you do aside from everything else, because you typically meet people, and when you ask them, what's in the way of you being innovative or innovating, they'll say, well, I don't have time and money, which to me immediately sort of sends a signal that people see it as this sort of like side thing that you'll do over here when you've got nothing else to do. And for me, it's more sort of a mindset being so if you were me, how would you make innovation a core capability? Um, like Ren, I don't know.
Start with
Either one of you.
a little bit of
Mhm.
stuff. Um, I think it's about establishing a bit of a sustainable cycle. There's something about healthcare right now where it seems to just be a consumer of products and other services and stuff, as opposed to a creator. And I think if you can figure out how to flip the levers on that, you will get a much more sustainable innovation cycle. It has to start to pay off. Like everything has to pay
Mhm.
off a little bit for people to want to do it, right? And they have to see the world being better at the end of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll build on that. I think on the payoff, I think then one strategy for that is you definitely take a portfolio approach where again, one framework I would use to map the portfolio of, innovation, let's call them projects or efforts or initiatives, is the three horizons, and there's different ways to do it. But on the horizontal would be, how much are you departing from your current offerings, customers, markets, whatever? Is it the current you're innovating in? Are you going adjacent? Maybe Waterloo Health Regional Network wants to get in a new care population that they don't do today. That's an adjacent market.
Mhm.
And is it net new? New. This is a third of the horizontal, like new to the world, or at least new to Ontario. And then the vertical of it would be, what kind of capability are you introducing or innovating on? Is it your core? Like, are you doing ER triage better? Is it an adjacent capability? Are you evolving what people can do? Maybe you're incorporating AI as a coworker for everybody. That's an adjacent. And then again, new to the region, new to Ontario. And so when you do those, kind of horizon one is core core, horizon two is adjacent adjacent, and horizon three is net new. So if you have a portfolio, maybe you have one horizon three going on, like a big dot, reinventing who you are, right? A
Mhm.
couple horizon twos, and you might have 8 or 9 horizon ones, which again, as Catherine said, if they're true innovation, they're still really hard, right, to do, because you have
Mhm.
to take away the old practice, replace it with the new, get value, and scale it. Then at least you'll get some quicker wins while you try to solve world peace in Horizon 3. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So I think that's a good one. And just one other tip of making it a core capability. And I think that comes a bit on maybe the CareNext and your role is uh, if your two organizations, Waterloo, you, and Ren, don't have a clear mandate of why they're doing innovation, and I mean with the KPIs, like, what is the target upon which Danina and her team are going to be, working towards as the result, right? And there's a whole bunch of metrics in innovation accounting. You can decide, but so that you know why you're doing it. So I'll give you an example. If you're in a legacy industry that is very not relevant anymore, and I'd say a lot of what healthcare is becoming irrelevant because our patients will find alternatives. They will at a very good
Hmm.
cost, pretty good experience, pretty good quality, right? Uh, you should have a KPI of some kind of like a turnover number of what proportion of the value, maybe it's revenue running through the hospital, I don't know whatever your metric is
Hmm.
because of the work of innovation versus the work
Yeah.
of core, like that could be a
Yeah.
KPI, right? So I think something like
Yeah.
that could help. I'll just say when I used to be a chief innovation officer of a 118-year-old organization that acted like it was 118, my KPIs, I had eight. And when I presented them to the senior leadership team every whatever 2 weeks, I'm like, if they're all green, fire me. Like it should be a
Hmm.
sea of red and yellow, right? That like because
Hmm.
you're unbundling and rebundling care, you know what I mean? So just keep that in mind that they should be very ambitious and aggressive, and that will force you to always be relentless and critical, as Catherine said, on your methods, on your approach. Don't do 30 projects. Maybe you just do two, and you
Hmm.
do them really well.
Mm. Well, we're in the middle. We've sort of dove off the deep end. You probably have seen it in public and social media that we've launched the ED Challenge. This was thrown to us from our provincial leadership to try and get our metric. Let's say metric sounds very simple, but it's incredibly ambitious, which is getting people in and out of ER in an hour. And so for all of us who have either walked through ER or worked in healthcare, we know that it's a highly complex problem, phased. And so I feel like we really bit off a huge chunk, but I'm really excited. We have actually just closed the challenge today, and I have heard that we got over 30 proposals, both organizational and
Awesome.
technical innovations. So we're now entering into a phase of evaluation of those, and I'm really looking forward to this process. But as you said, like it's I know it's going to be treacherous because it's a wicked problem, and it's a problem that's been looked at from so many angles and doesn't
And
seem like
back to
anyone's
Zaina's
supposed to be.
Zaina's definition, if the average wait in an ER, I don't know what it is in your system, it's 4 to
Mhm.
18 hours, depending on
Mhm.
the day of the week, and you're going
Mhm.
to get an hour, you're at 4x at least. So you passed
Mhm.
my check mark. That is an innovation problem. That is not a quality improvement incremental, and that is not
Mhm.
a build more ERs problem. That's
Yeah.
trying to use supply to deal with demand.
Yeah, exactly. I think we're opening it up to audience questions, and we already have some. I feel like this first one we've been sort of like tinkling with it a little bit. How do you sustain innovation in healthcare with funding challenges? Um,
Oh, I've got lots of ideas. I used to be in the same
mhm.
boat. I think,
Mhm.
a bit of, Catherine alluded to this a bit, that there are no shortage of real, serious, day-to-day, massive challenges with the business model, let's say, of hospital care that is not allowing you to deliver on your social license, which is to deliver kind of affordable quality care when people need it. And we pay for that with our taxes. It's in the law of the Canada Health Act. Our ability to do that today is under massive strain. And so not just the money to do innovation, but just the bandwidth, the space, all that other stuff is under massive strain. But of course, innovation is the only way out of it, too. So in
Exactly.
terms of capital, we have a problem with the Canada Hospitals Act that you're not allowed to produce a profit to have working capital. So if I'm a Coca-Cola or Lululemon or Pfizer or Ford Motor Company, my business model is designed to create surplus that I invest in my R&D. That is a normal cycle. And most nonprofits do that too. St. Eliz, we were a nonprofit. We
Mhm.
generated surplus which we invested in many vehicles of innovation to create the future. Hospitals aren't allowed to take a profit, they can't carry over. You'll lose the budget next year. So it's a fundamental problem that you can't create the working capital to finance your own R&D, which to me is innovation when it comes to care. So then you're finding other sources of working capital. The tradition, of course, are grants, non-dilutive
Mhm.
capital. If you get into kind of commercialization, you can get your working
Mhm.
capital, but very hard to do. And I think that's where you've got access to foundations and other ways that Waterloo has been very creative on finding nouveau capital. I will just say one of my big kind of talks I do with hospitals is about new sources. What's the new capital stack and what's the new revenue stack? That is not asking mama government for a transfer payment. There are such creative ways to unlock money. Bill Gates just announced yesterday he's winding down his $200 billion of wealth to solve some of the messy problems in the world by, I think, in 20 years, right?
Yeah.
There is some new money out there that wants to be put to social good that is not your traditional capital markets, grants, and government that I would encourage because of the Hospital Act. You're going to have to go out and find, and I think you can.
I also think that if you go from that notion of innovation as an embedded function, where you are constantly looking for, you're empowered, you have tools, you have resources, you have support to think differently. I think this sort of idea limits us to thinking that it's something that you have to sort of acquire and plug in. And a lot of the times it is, but sometimes you can actually within the existing frameworks
Yeah, I mean,
just
quality
turn things
improvement.
around.
Yeah,
And
quality
it's
improvement does that. It's built into, let's call it the price you're charging government. So then
Mhm.
just innovation's built in. I love that idea. I'm going to steal that, Danina.
Yeah, pleasure. Um, Second question, how can we ensure a culture of empowerment for staff to be comfortable questioning the status quo with grassroots innovation in a hierarchical leadership model when some people are threatened by change? Well, I could start us off on this one. So, built into the program that I am standing up right now is that idea of a sort of a like bi-directional governance where the leadership sets the vision, but the actual ideas are raised from grassroots and you kind of look for them to meet in the middle so that what we are doing is purposeful and it does lead us towards that place where the vision was set, but it's actually generated from the grassroots. I mean, it can because it requires, because it's not still not with all the word being so repeated and ubiquitous across the healthcare system, it's not a traditional and mainstream function of healthcare institutions. So it's sort of homegrown pretty much across the system. It's rarely, if ever, financed through the ministerial sort of money flows, and as such, they require the commitment and the vision of the leadership and can be perceived as very top-down activities, which is which brings us to the point, why is it so important that the actual program, the empowerment and the enablement is raised from the grassroots. And that's certainly my vision for CareNext, and what I'm looking to bring is, yes, we want to leverage the support of the leadership, but we actually want to bring the capacity, the tools, the know-how, and the empowerment to the grassroots so that the solutions can emerge from there. I don't know if you have any additional insight or ideas to offer, Catherine and Zena.
For me, I would just say a lot of education on both sides. Okay, so educating staff that are interested in innovation um, on being part of it, but also educating leadership on why grassroots innovation is really, really important. Okay,
Mhm.
why change, what they can get out of change, why they have to be listening as well. And back to that kind of idea of trust, right? And so getting that trust kind of going. It's going to take a while, right? It's going to take moving through a few projects. It's going to take experiencing the wins or
Mhm.
let's say the positive ones that didn't work out as well. I'm trying to not say the F word. That's what I would say. Yeah.
I'll just add to that. I think for sure the celebrating the hyper communication. I always say there's a rule of thirds when you're doing innovation work. A third is doing the actual work, let's say projects. A third is capacity building, which I think is a lot of what you're doing, and a third is communication. This
Communication,
monthly
exactly.
series is
Yeah.
by design, Nadina, right? And when you told me you're going to do it, I'm like,
Yes.
yes. And with the next one, you're going to celebrate. You're going to celebrate some cool
Yes.
stuff. That way. And when
Yes.
I saw it, my mind was blown, and I know that's your next one. So no question, but a couple of other things to think about. You're going to have to decide though, do you want 100% of what you guys support to come from the people closest to the customer? Let's call it usually, your clinicians.
Mhm.
When I did it, that I think that's actually not safe because um, who's going to be looking out at what's around the world and what is, a much better opportunity or way versus innovating from today, right? So I had a 70-30. 70% of our
Mhm.
intake valve of our pipeline was from the people closest to where all the value of the company gets created because they're seeing it every day and everything. A permission, environment, which I actually think Waterloo, you're at a massive advantage in your region. It's a little bit in the drinking supply, which others would salivate to have that starting culture, even though the question implied hierarchy and a permission culture. But I think 20 or 30%, Danina, is you and your network and your team and your researchers at Waterloo who are internationally networked. They're always on the edge, bringing in either, again, a brand new opportunity that you never even thought of or a completely orthogonal way to solve the problem. I'll just give you an example. Let's say you want to do in and out of the ER in an hour, right? That implies your scope is innovating in the four walls. And I would be like, do the ER at home, shut down your ER. What? Why? That's in 16 states in the United States with incredible results, a very flex light model. But I know that because I'm out looking, and Danina, you are too, right? So I think just think about
Mhm.
that. And last thing about staff who have a lot going on, two techniques or strategies I've seen work really well. We did one of these is when people can come on a 6 month, 1 year, 3 month secondment or a rotation through the innovation team. That's the best because they get in, they love it, they're excited, and then they go back and then you can leave them, right? And so maybe it's you pay a third, their department pays a third, and I don't know, a philanthropist pays a third of their salary. I don't know what happens, but there's different ways to finance that. That's
Mhm.
one. The other is in whatever way you do compensation, and if there's some variable portion, leading health systems in the world, uh, showing how stuff you did in that last year or 6 months, whatever way do you do bonus, drove the innovation agenda of your employer is a very good way to align incentives.
Incentivize. Yeah. Yeah. Thank
Kaiser
you.
Kaiser pegs 15% of their variable compensation, whether you're a nurse, whether you're the clerk in the finance department, or you're the CEO. 15%
Mhm.
is tied to proving something you did, contributed to, or advanced innovation.
Mm. Yeah, it's a good, well, and I can share that in our, now as we have come together as one organization, and we are, coming up with a strategic planning framework, having innovation as a KPI across our senior leadership team is something that's on the table. I believe this is going to be a quick answer. Does Ren have any projects planned that will give us the 5X factor? So I think we have our ED challenge that's underway, and anyone from Ren here who's interested and committed, there will definitely be an opportunity. I think this really speaks to the importance of leadership structure. This way of thinking needs to be built into the way of thinking, and the culture needs to be built into hiring practices for leadership roles as they have the power. I mean, I would broaden it to say, that it goes beyond just the leadership. I can speak from experience that I'm bringing to this role, which is founding an innovation hub inside a healthcare integrated health and social services network in Quebec, in Montreal, that it was built across the hiring practices, and it became a kind of a virtuous cycle, a feedback loop where the fact that we had an innovation hub that had tangible results and that hyper communication, right? So it was a known fact, made us a point of attraction. And so like one metric was that, there was I think 8 times number of nursing applicants to our network as opposed to others. And when we would probe during the recruitment process, people would say that the fact that there is an innovation hub and capacity, capability, opportunity to be innovative was the reason that people applied. And then in turn, they brought that sort of innovation mindset. So to me, it goes beyond the leadership. It actually sort of needs to be embedded across functions. And I'm looking
I'll just
forward to
add two other
celebrating.
areas, the board of
Mhm,
directors or any of your governance functions.
mhm,
It is not enough for them to play the role of oversight, which is,
mhm,
it's got to be insight and foresight future. If your governance
mhm,
members, your boards of directors is not pressuring the CEO and the management team, what are you doing to future proof this org? They're not doing their
mhm,
job. So that's a big, and then I'd say patients. I don't know where patients are, but at St. Eliz, we had a little group. They're called the Wiser Advisors because we were seniors. Some of our patients led our innovation projects. They're ultimately the reason we all have jobs. So just really thinking about, yeah, your whole community as a
mhm.
kind of a competency versus, yeah, the old school model of the leaders.
I don't know, Catherine, do you have any insight? I'm sure.
I don't know. I think you've been doing a really great wrap up. Yeah.
Mhm. Thank you. Thank you. We're 4 minutes out, so time to maybe address one question, and then I'd like to ask another one to our audience. I mean, questions have disappeared. Courtney, would you mind just bring it back? I'll take one more, and then we'll go to the um, so, what is the plan to, and I think this ties really well with what what Zainab just said, include users' actual voice in this work that includes both patient and frontline employees who are using the tools being innovated. I find so many points of failure start with non-matching actual. So this is really at the crux of CareNext and the previous program that I have built. I mean, it's what I stand for. It's the flag I've wave and have woven this through my recruitment process is the focus on needs-based innovation and the user-centric innovation. And by user I mean those who receive care as well as those who provide care. And so there's concerted effort underway in building this program, both through our various committees that engage patients. So we have I think it's called a Patient Experience Committee, working with our colleagues from quality, engaging through there, but also engaging with the broader community. So with University of Waterloo and some of the platforms that are emerging there, we're even thinking of a kind of a community engagement innovation lab. How can we be innovative in the way that we involve the community and then also push the knowledge back to the community? So I would say to me, this is at the crux of everything that we do. Zaina, I'm sure you've got lots to
No,
say.
I think that's right. I mean, that's a given.
That's
And I
it.
think Catherine's such an expert on, human-centered
Mhm,
design. And you guys have all the skill set. And Danina, this was your MO. It's just a given.
mhm.
It will not work if it's not designed the way that question
Yeah.
was asked.
Yeah, no, thank you. All right, so we have we're almost at time. I would like to before we close today's session, ask one last reflection of our community, of our audiences. So if using your Slido, you can let us know what is one small way you can enable innovation in your work or studies starting tomorrow. While I am looking for answers to populate, I will say that, well, first of all, thanks Zaina and Catherine, our incredible panelists today, for their insight and generosity, and to all of you for showing up with curiosity and openness to this very first session. We were, I think, an amazing number of people for a very first. I also hope, like as I said, these will be monthly. I hope you'll join us for the next CareNext collective session where we will feature a team from Bren who has been incredibly innovative in their work. They'll share their why and how and offer a window into what innovation looks like on the ground. Until then, keep challenging assumptions, inviting collaboration, and enabling innovation where you are. Couple of words to in terms of how people will be enabling innovation. So curiosity, challenge the norm, discussions, demand more, turn the hierarchical triangle upside down, question the status quo, ask and listen to the frontline staff, foresight practice, always ask why not, stay connected, open mind, change status quo orthodoxy, ideas, micro innovation journal. Love it all. Love it all. So with that, we are exactly at 1 o'clock. Again, thank you to our incredible panelists, and thank you to all of you who have shown up today. As I said, keep challenging assumptions, inviting collaboration, and look forward to welcoming you in June and showcasing to you our first example of an incredibly innovative team from Brand. Thank you all very much. Thanks.